Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well today. Let's take a look at unemployment, low unemployment, an introduction and overview. And this is one of the units of macroeconomics, which is beautifully complicated and beautifully simple. And it is your job as an IB student to decipher, to sort through and figure out what portions of this you're going to pull out in order to have a thorough understanding of low unemployment. The cool thing about low unemployment, it's all over the news. And there's no way of escaping it. If you have had a family situation for one of your parents was unemployed, you know that it has a huge impact on your life. And if you can imagine, you have one unemployed parent in a house, that impacts the house. So if you have a high proportion, which would be somewhere around like 10, 15% in a developed nation of unemployment in a country, then it's going to have big impacts on the house that's the country. So unemployment is a really critical thing to have a thorough understanding of, and I think it actually is really exciting to learn about. Right? The unemployment rate is affected by how many jobs are in the economy. It's affected by what kinds of industries are producing jobs or are being successful. You could have one sector of society that's not doing well and another sector of society that is. You could have one sector of the society that's not doing well and that affects other sectors. And many things will affect the unemployment rate, which are exchange rates, the cost of raw materials, the economic conditions elsewhere. And all of this, of course, will affect wages. Because if you can imagine, the lower the unemployment rate, right, the more people there are going to be, the more unemployed people, rather, the more willing people will be to accept a lower rate, a lower labor rate, okay? So let's take a look at a few key terms just to get started here, and then we'll do a little bit of overview and understanding, what is hidden unemployment, because there's some secret forces that are at play that we really need to understand. So here you go. So let's take a look at some big ideas more specifically, right? Obviously, unemployment is a main economic goal of almost every government. And the unemployment is a highly publicized topic. If you've been tracking on the recovery of the United States since 2008 and the Obama administration, any chance it gets to brag about the low unemployment rate as opposed to when Obama took office, it does. Okay, so therefore, elected officials care a lot about this information, and you'll see it in the news often. Obviously, if the government in power, if there's a lot of unemployment in a country and it's a democracy, and the political parties that are not in power, they're going to use that as political fodder, right? To convince people to switch their allegiances from one political party to another. And of course, as I said in the introduction, the coolest part of this unit is that it matters a lot to everyone in society. All right, so let's get a handle on some key terms. Unemployment is one of these things you've heard a lot about, and I just warn you before you look at these terms, like, be careful. You got to make sure you make some really clear distinctions in your mind between unemployment, unemployment rate, the labor force, hidden unemployment, and make sure you don't make any assumptions about what you know ahead of time, okay? So, unemployment is defined as people of working age who are without work, are available for work, and are actively seeking employment. If someone is not actively seeking employment, then they are not calculated into the unemployment rate. That's something important for you to realize. Okay, so they are people of working age. So in most societies, in most countries, industrial societies, it's 16 or over. They don't have a job. They're able to work, and they're looking for it. So it's people who are looking for work because they don't have it, who are of a certain age that don't have work. Okay? Cool. So then what's the labor force? Well, the labor force, there should be a T there, obviously. The labor force, otherwise known as the workforce, is essentially the economically active population. So that would eliminate students. That would eliminate people, retired people, right? That would eliminate people that are stay-at-home parents and others who are choosing not to work. If somebody takes a gap year between high school and university, they're not unemployed, right? They are what? Well, they're not actively looking for a job, so they're not calculated into the unemployment rate, nor should they be. So therefore, you take unemployment is a calculation of the labor force, and those looking for money, looking for a job, and the unemployment rate therefore is the number of people who are unemployed expressed as a percentage of the total labor force, right? So the total labor force are essentially the active economically active people of the population. So if your grandparents are retired, then they're not part of the economically active population. So they would be considered part of the workforce, and therefore they wouldn't affect the unemployment rate. And that all makes logical sense if you think about it. So here's a key idea I want you to get your head around, right? This idea of hidden employment. And some students really struggle with this at first because you don't realize that there are things that go on in the economy that aren't accounted for. So let's get a definition first. Hidden unemployment, is employment that's not in official statistics because of such factors as exclusion of long-time unemployed, part-time workers, or overqualified workers. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it consists of several different groups. The first of all, long-term unemployed. What that means is that these are people who have been unemployed, obviously, for a long period of time, and have just given up work, given up the search for work. These are sometimes people call these discouraged workers, right? And since they're no longer looking for work, they're no longer considered to be unemployed, because unemployed means that you're actively seeking work. So if an unemployment rate, therefore, would not calculate this in, and you can see that what's going to happen if you get more information about unemployment, it's going to skew the realities of the number. You might have 5% unemployment rate, but that doesn't mean that 5% of the population isn't working. Most likely there's more. Okay, so keep that in mind. Unemployment also does not take into account part-time workers, right? And so this is part of the hidden unemployed, right? They're people who have part-time work but they would really like to be working full-time. And if you've ever had family members who maybe got laid off from a job and they were a full-time worker, and then all of a sudden they got a job, but they're working only maybe 10, 15 hours a week. Well, a full-time job in most industrialized nations gives you 40 hours of work, or at least 40 hours of pay. But somebody who's working, right? So they're not unemployed, so they're not included in the unemployment rate, but they have a part-time job, which means that they're not really fully employed the way that they would like to be. Okay, so that therefore you can think about this as a discrepancy or a lack of clarity, or a lack of unemployment rate wouldn't take this into account. So it's not full data that you would want to have. Okay. Then the other thing, and this is really interesting to people, and this actually happened to my dad, overqualified workers. Okay, so another group of people hidden from official unemployment figures are people who are working in jobs which they're greatly overqualified. So an example would be somebody who has an advanced degree, who would be, their qualifications would mean that they could have, say, a senior executive level position if they had experience, but they don't, right? They don't, because the jobs aren't available. So they have a job, except their skills are higher than what they're actually employed. And so they're overqualified workers. In other words, they're not contributing their full amount to society that they could. So therefore, if you think about it back to the terms of capacity, overqualified workers, they're working, but they're overqualified for their job, and therefore the total capacity of what they're capable of doing is not being taken into account, and there's a loss to the overall welfare of society as a result. Because a maximizing economy will have people who are fully employed, but also fully they're using their skills the most efficient way possible. Okay, so there's some introduction stuff to unemployment. It's a really cool topic, and go through in a really methodical way these videos. Make sure you do them and don't get ahead of yourself, because you really want to make sure you follow these layers, these foundational layers, which will lead to a great understanding of unemployment. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. We'll talk to you in a bit.